brought in $100,000 from
Running up the side of this volcano. Yeah. You'll never, ever be on my stage. I was making $150,000 a weekend. One day I decided to quit. Hooked on Dirt, the most.
Hey everyone, Gavin Lance Top here. I've got, I think, the most amazing guest that I've ever had. And that says a lot because I've had some amazing guests. But I want to just start with this guy has put me back on my heels from time to time. I want to say, one of the things that caught my attention with this guest is when I first heard his story. So we're going to hear about his story today. But I remember him saying that he spent 10 years just traveling at the back end of going away for a weekend and just never come home, which is an amazing experience. What a travel around the world, mate, which is amazing. He's trained over 1 million people. That's something. To do a range of different things. But one of the things that I think everyone listening, and you've got to listen very carefully, he's the trainer of trainers. That's something to be at that level. Climb mountains, climb Kilimanjaro. But I want to say one thing, all right? This is why people must really listen to what this man's going to say. This is what I've been able to create off one message. I remember Dave sent me a message. This is a voice message, went for a couple of minutes. I created something that was similar to the message. And over the following 10 days, 2 weeks, brought in $100,000 from one message. So we're going to do a whole podcast today from this. So you're going to listen very carefully. And there's not many people that have done this, but I've actually had, David actually had one of my daughters in his home, in his house for us. So it's not just, this guy's not just a mentor, not just a trainer, he's a personal friend, somebody that I feel comfortable having my family stay with. So David T.S. Wood, you are the man. Mate, thank you so much for coming on today.
Wow, it's so funny. And by the way, I didn't get my royalty from the 100 grand in 10 days. I don't know. Hey, so, I want to take you back to a moment where you and I met, because I always think I love stories. My favorite collection is people.
Yeah.
And I remember the moment that I connected with you on this deeper level. I don't know, do you ever swear on your podcast? Because you swore that day, and okay, I won't. But we were on a zip line and I was behind you and you didn't know I was behind you. And you were with Michelle, your wife, and I was listening to you as a husband and a man and a protector. We were taking her and you onto a zip line, which is incredibly scary for a lot of people. And I was listening to you guide her, and I was listening to your masculinity talk through your actions. But then I saw you get on the zip line. I won't say what you said, but it was just this young boy who was like a toddler, a 2-year-old, a 5-year-old, a 9-year-old, a 12-year-old, just suddenly came out of you like this joyous being. And you just got in the moment completely fearless. And it was just this beautiful thing. And I thought, this man, there's something that I think every human and every man, especially, because I know you talk to men mainly, about authenticity. And I looked to you and I thought, oh my God, this guy lives in a world of truth and authenticity, which could be a life's work for most people. So that was the moment we really met. So I don't know if you remember that, but I remember.
Yippee-yay!
That's the one. That's it. Yippee-yay! That's right.
And man, what a way to meet. One of the things I also remember, what you lit up. See, you say you've seen that in me. You brought that out of me. You're the trainer of trainers. You brought that to the surface. I remember another moment just saying a bit of a yippee up a volcano, a live volcano in Vanuatu. You did that, mate.
So it's funny. I want to give context to that because we were in the back of a truck. My son was with me, Benjamin, and Ben and Gavin had spent the day together. They were talking, and we took a plane across to this island in Vanuatu. For those that don't know, is in the South Pacific. It's a chain of islands, and there's an active volcano where you can stand on the edge. And Gavin was talking greatness into my son about this kind of, again, the quest that he's on now. This is before he really started this particular chapter of his work, but this was him just living it and oozing it out. And there's my son in awe of this guy just because of who he was. And then Gavin jumps off the back of this truck, and there are massive boulders. This volcano is shooting rocks into the air, hundreds of feet, and they're littered in the landscape. The boulders as big as 50 feet across, 20 feet across. And there's Gavin running up the side of this volcano. Yeah. And my son's like, that's who I want to be when I grow up.
I'm not growing up.
I'm not going to grow up. Yeah. Hey, my 65th birthday in a few days. Like,
Come on.
People are like, what's it like to be grown up? I said, I haven't grown up yet. What are you talking about?
Terrific. And man, that must be coming on 10 years ago now. That's something. Must be close to like
no concept.
28.
Yeah, no concept of time. I just remember, like, when you feel someone deeply, it feels like yesterday. That's why all these memories are so clear. I can remember things you said to Ben that day on the back of the truck. Do you remember when we drove through these villages and how people came to the side of the road and they were just so present and smiling? And I found Vanuatu to be one of the happiest places on earth. And we really were. People were so beautiful and so connected to us. Yeah. Anyway, well, and I want to tell your audience something. We have not spoken about what this is about. You've not sent me any questions. I didn't expect that from you at all. And that's what I love about this is the authenticity, the fact that we both trust the moment and we trust the process of being together. So I'm so excited to see where this goes.
Yeah, me too. And what you created in Vanuatu was just so unique for everybody. I remember we did something else as well with the famous Alan and Larry as well. It was on Stradbroke Island. You just create all these unique things for trainers. And you're training the trainers to enlarge our capacity. So, man, I want to honor you.
Thank you. You know what it is, again, those listening, I'll change my energy just for you to get that, is it's so easy with the brains that we have. If we understand how the mind is formed and how the brain, how we're conditioned by environment, by the people around us, by experiences, by history, and the world just becomes smaller and smaller and smaller. And that's why so many people, they just get caught up in these small worlds. And what I believe your work does, Gavin, on who you are as a human being is the same as what I've always wanted to do, is get people outside. And I use this word, their current zone of comfort, because the brain does everything to keep us there and it tricks us. And when we realize that the brain is a trickster, it's not trying to trick us. What it's doing is trying to keep us alive. It's trying to keep us safe, physically safe, emotionally safe. So what it does is it tricks us and we think it's real. And it's only when we challenge that limited thinking and we start to live our world outside of our comfort zone, that's where all the juice, all the magic, all the wonder, or if we talk on an intimate scale, that's where true intimacy lies, outside of our zone of comfort. And we talk on a physical scale, that's where our courage lies, outside of the zone of comfort. Financial, outside of the zone of comfort, right? So I think getting uncomfortable and knowing that feeling, what it feels like to cross the threshold of our comfort zone, and we all have the same feeling, it's just with practice, some of us, like you and I, we get excited by that moment of saying, I'm stepping into something new and not listening to that preconditioned mind that's saying, come back, stay safe, don't get hurt.
Yeah. And mate, can I ask, when was like, because we're always talking about leveling up, and the best way has been the right tribe, the right environment, having a mentor, a coach, a leader, somebody to show us the next step or the maybe bring the path a little clearer. Well, in your journey, when did you kind of start saying, hang on, I want to, because I mean, for me, I would say in one word, you're living a life of adventure. Adventure seems to bring you alive, or doing things for the first time. When did that kind of get turned on, or who was it?
I think if I go back to you talked about a moment where I left England for 6 days with 12 friends, and we were going to Tunisia, which is North Africa. And there was something, I'd started writing poetry, and it sounds weird for a guy in England who I was doing drugs, drinking, I was in trouble with the police, I was in police cells, all that stuff was going on, but something was calling me. I started doing this meditation, which stopped the noise, and I was spending a lot of time in deep reflection or connected to something deeper. And people call it different things. You may call it God, or you may call it the universe. However anyone interprets that, there was something kind of speaking to me, And so I started writing poetry. And I remember, this is, what am I, 65? So I wrote this when I was 18. Like I can probably recite some of it because it was such a meaningful moment. And I wrote poems every single day. But I remember writing something, it was something like this. It was like, to be alone in a crowded room, is there something wrong with me? How come the people around me can't see the things I see? It's easy to take another drink and obscure the life we've made and hide behind faded minds what stupid games we play, striving to accomplish, to make the coffers full, to build our little kingdoms that we try in vain to rule. And then when we have our precious objects and this world we do depart. Anyway, it goes, and I'm writing this stuff down, and here I am getting drunk at night, getting high, getting in trouble, but there was something else speaking to me. So when I went to Tunisia, I had no plan to travel. And you have to go back in time. We're talking about 40 or 45 years ago.
You wouldn't know where you were.
There was no Google. There was no, if you wanted to find out about a country, you got an encyclopedia and there was a little blurb about this big. You remember, Gav, right?
Yeah.
Just if you wanted to travel, you had to talk to people. And I had $1,000 left, Gav. And I decided I would travel until my money ran out. I spent half of it the first week. I think I was scared for about a year. And I went from Tunisia and I went over, I flew into Egypt.
Could you take us, because I've heard you talk about that moment when you're staying and you said goodbye.
Oh, I'm standing at the airport and they're calling my name on the thing. I've got the ticket in my hand and you're in North Africa. I'm wearing, back then, I had little short shorts, frayed edges, and I had a red muscle shirt on. Or what do you call it in your country, right? But, like, and I'm in an Arab country where showing body is an insult. It really, it insults their culture. It insults their religion. They cover their bodies, they cover their heads. And here I am, half naked. And these guys get on the plane and I watch the plane taxi out onto the runway. And there's this kind of, it's so hot. There's no air conditioning in this airport and I'm sweating. And I'm now like, and I'm in this moment. There's no way to get on the plane. I don't have a ticket anywhere. And I turn around and here's this foreign country and people are visibly hostile because I have no understanding that how I appear is complete contrast to their belief systems. And so I was feeling this total, oh crap, what have I done? And I went back to the hotel that we'd been staying at. And that's why I spent half my money. And I just sat, I didn't leave the room for a whole week. And I just kept counting my money. And then I kept looking at one stamp in my passport. And I kept thinking, Gav, when I get back, I'm going to show everyone where I've been. I was not doing it at that moment for myself. I was doing it because I thought it would make, when I went back, people would think I did something great. But I was so scared. And I remember the moment I stopped being scared. I was in Israel. I was on a bus. And the Israelis, they're all in the army.
Where did you go? Where did you go? How did you get this?
I went from Tunisia. This is so funny. I went to a travel agent in Tunisia, in Tunis, the capital, and I tried to buy a ticket to Israel. Now, remember, the Arabs and Israelis don't recognize the country. And the guy's like, Israel doesn't exist. He spoke English, the travel agent. I said, what are you talking about? And I was so ignorant of the world and of people and everything. What I learned, Gav, over the years that came was everything that I've been taught by my friends at home in the pub about people, about culture, about French people, about these people, or that people, or Arabs, was all wrong. It was just all wrong. But there was this thing where I tried to fly into Israel. They say, can't. So I flew into Egypt. And then I went from Egypt, I went through the Sinai Desert, and then I went into Israel. And I spent a year in Israel, and I worked all over Israel in different things. But I had to work illegally. I didn't have work permits in any country. So I had to develop this way of being like meeting people and them liking or trusting me enough to say, hey, I'll give you a job, but B, I'll pay you under the table. And I did that for 10 and a half years.
Yeah. And I suppose, I would imagine there was a few, but certain people along the way that spoke things into you.
Yeah, I think it was, and you asked that question, that's where we started with this, is what the mentor. I think the biggest mentor wasn't actually a person. It was this, that every day I was outside of what was comfortable. I had to live in a world where there was no comfort because finding food, and I almost had no money. I was down to pounds, I think, when I got into Egypt. and I got ripped off the first night for 70 of it, right? It was just this kind of crazy thing. So I lived in this world where the biggest mentor was the idea that if I wanted to continue, that I had to find the courage, to leave where I was, and I had to find the courage to go to speak to people. And then I had to find the fortitude inside myself for them to see me, to like me, to trust me. And so I think the first mentor was actually my action. It wasn't necessarily a person. It was just this idea that I didn't have a choice. I couldn't even afford a ticket home. Be honest with you. I didn't have enough money to buy a ticket back to England. And there's no way on earth my parents, I couldn't have called them. My dad refused to collect call. I was estranged from my family at that time. So I would say the first thing, but then every time I met somebody, I remember, for example, learning how to touch another human, because I grew up in England and touching wasn't something we did. But I mean, in a way of, there's some cultures when you talk to them, they're constantly, your guys can sit and hug each other, or you're slapping hands, or and it just felt very foreign. And I worked on a beach in Israel with a guy called Shlomo. And Shlomo was this guy, he was like a fish who had the kindest soul I'd ever met. He was so present, and he lived on the beach. And so I used to help him. I helped him on the beach. We'd get the beach ready for the tourists, and he was a lifeguard. And so I would go there and work with him. And we'd sit for hours and talk, and we'd catch fish, and we'd cook it on this little fire. And I just remember having met somebody for the first time who I felt was really present and connected to something. It was the sea, it was the sand, he had this affinity with something I couldn't even feel at that point. And I learned to see the ocean through his eyes, and I learned to feel what he was feeling. And every single day we'd sit there and have these beautiful conversations. And I remember simple interaction like that shifting me inside and saying, I want to talk to people. I want to have the ability to sit with someone and let them feel what I feel with Shlomo. And I have hundreds of stories like that. One time in Morocco, I was climbing in the high Atlas Mountains, and I was alone. And this guy walked by me with I have a shirt off. I have it over my head because it's so hot. This is down in this Marrakesh, and the high Atlas Mountains are gorgeous. And I thought I'd just hike. And I slept on a roof the night before. And this guy walked by me with his mule, and he's got a big Afghan coat on. And he doesn't look at me, doesn't talk to me. And I say in Arabic, because I always try and learn every language a little bit so I can say, hello, sorry for your language, right? And I'm sorry, kif halak. And so he just walked. And I think because of the way I dressed again. But I kept hiking, and I kept hiking behind him. And after about 2 hours, he stopped and he motioned to me to come. And he couldn't speak any English. I couldn't speak any Arabic. And he motioned me behind this rock, and there was a little drip of water coming out of a rock that no one could have ever found. And he took a drink, and he encouraged me. So we walked together, and then and I put my shirt back on, and I was more presentable. I had a little backpack, and I had 2 falafels in my backpack with 2 oranges and a bottle of water. And I didn't know quite what to do because we couldn't really talk, but he'd stop and he would talk in Arabic, and he'd point down to the valley, which was all blossoms. And then as we were higher into the mountains, it was just this changing landscape. And he took me into these little villages, and we stopped for tea. And then finally we got to his house. I didn't know what was going to happen. It was a little village, no electricity. And we took his mule into the bottom, and there was a donkey in the bottom, and there was a cow in the house, and the house was all rickety. Now it's dark. I can't even see. And his kids were wearing sacks. They had shaved heads. And again, he took me onto the roof of his house, and I was there for a couple of hours. I still had this food. And when he came out, I never met his wife. He came out with a hot kettle and soap, and I washed my hands, and he brought the most beautiful meal I've ever eaten. And it was tagine with wild rabbit. And we're sitting there eating food. And again, no language, common, and the stars, because there's no lights. And I just remember being moved so deeply. And I remember when he went to bed, I'm laying there on this roof. And every time I opened my eyes, it felt like the stars were closer and closer. And I can tell you hundreds of stories where I've spent 2 or 3 days with people that didn't speak a word of my language, but you connect on this other level, and they allow you into their home because of this deeper, more meaningful, and more, I don't want to use the word spiritual, but it kind of is. There's this depth of connection. So I would say loads of those experiences are what became my mentors.
And because I'm still thinking of that, one of the first, at the start of our conversation, you talked about you're in that hotel room, your mates have left, you've got a couple $100, you look at your passport with one stamp, and you're thinking, well, when you get back, that's going to be full. You'll have, in my language, some kind of status, or they'll
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
then go to that sort of connection. That was just from what you've said. That was a accumulation of experiences and meeting with people. Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, it really was. And it just, I never had a plan. I just was living in a world of like the unknown, like I talked about, but this level of trust. But again, what happened was every time you went somewhere, you'd meet someone, and that person, sometimes you'd travel for a day. It's like your daughter when she was here, how she made such deep friends with Michaela and
Yeah.
Sierra, Mike and Donna, which led her to another experience, and another door opened, and another door opened.
Yeah.
And that was kind of like it was for me. It was like, where 10 and a half years went, 42 countries, you know,
Yeah.
and working illegally in every single country. It just kind of happened until I fell in love with Canada, and I wanted to find a way to stay because I didn't plan even to come to Canada. But
Yeah.
can I show you the view real quick? Look at
Yeah.
look at the view from my living room. Look, this is
Wow.
Canada.
Amazing. Come on. Because
Yeah.
that was my next question. And what was the one thing or the accumulation of things that said, hang on, that season of traveling is over or coming to an end? What was there? Was there one thing? Was there accumulation? Was it somebody? What got you to stop?
Yeah, I think what happened was when I came to Canada, because I was illegal here for about 3 years. I came and went, and I had to figure out a way to stay. So there was this. I just realized that I'd felt something here that I hadn't. It felt like it was home for me. It wasn't like, oh, it's time to stop. It was
No.
just a accumulation. It's funny because the very first night here in Canada, the first night here, yeah, I didn't plan to come to the country. I met 9 people that night, and that was in 1989. And we do a golf tournament 35 years this year. Like those same 9 people I met the very first night.
Wow.
Gavin, can you imagine? But yeah, I think there was just something about this country and how people were. People were so open. It just felt like, wow, if I could find a way to stay,
Yeah.
all right. And my first job here was a dishwasher, earning $4 an hour, right? And then that led to, and I shared a house with 9 guys. My bed was under the ping pong table in the basement. So
Good spot.
I had a sleeping bag under the, right? And it was just like these doors kept opening, but I wanted something. There was a part of me that, if I go back in time, I remember doing a vision board, but it wasn't a board. It was like I had a binder, and I remember doing a vision board. And I can't remember, the first book I read was Think and Grow Rich. And I was forced to read it. I went to my first personal development program, and it was 2.5 days, and I had to read Think and Grow Rich. And I'm thinking, hold on a sec. Are you telling me if I think differently, I could? Because I hadn't money. I'd lived without money my whole life. My mother's was broke. My family broke. We grew up in a condemned building in the East End of London, right?
Yeah.
So money was not something that I always had enough, but I didn't know that I could be wealthy. I was labeled a slum kid. For me, wealth was not something that I even understood. And then there was this moment where I was asked to read this book. And when I read this book, so I would say Zig Ziglar became my first real mentor in the sense, hold on a sec, what if I was to change? I had these muscles of connection. I had this courage to walk into the unknown. And I knew I could really connect with people because I'd had to do it for 10 years, all different types of people. But then there was this moment of, what if I was to apply this? Could I actually design and create the life of my dreams? And that was the moment there. And that was probably in 1991. And that, it took a while, right?
Hey, you're only young, man. So tell us about when that penny dropped. I suppose in my words, there's a penny that drops. Hang on, what if I could apply that in this area? What was the 90s like then? When you're thinking about, because that when you made a decision to grow wealth or
No,
involved in development?
I didn't start really thinking about wealth, like growing wealth, until my 40s probably. But in my 30s, it was just building businesses. I had this thing where, and I had all different types of businesses. I had a restaurant and bar, a country and western saloon. I had a natural products distribution company. So I just went into business, and what I realized what I was good at was the vision and to grow something and then sell it. I wasn't the good manager. I wasn't the guy that could run a business for 5 years, but I was really good at the vision part. So I started to just really focus, and everything I did, Gav, and I think this came from traveling. So to work illegally for someone, if this comes back to how I approach business as well, what I do, I go in, someone give me a job, and I'd look at who they, let's say, it doesn't matter. I'll use one example. When I first came to Canada, I cleaned hotel rooms. So they had their star employee, and I'd watch that person and see everything they did. And all I'd do is copy what they did. And I would then add other layers. I would actually see if I could do more. And it was noticeable. I never talked about it, but employers. So what I do is I'd often say, hey, I'll work for free. And then as long as you give me room and board. So that's how I normally get in the door. So they wouldn't pay me. And after about 4 or 5, 6 days or a week, I'd say, hey, sorry, I got to leave. And they'd say, why? And I'd say, because I need to make money. They're like, we'll pay you, because I was so good. And so I applied that to business. I'd go into any kind of a business and I'd look at who or what was doing what they did the best. And I'd say, if I just copy that, if I model what they're doing and then add more to it, then I'm going to stand out. And so I would always, first, it wasn't like just working hard. It was realizing what worked and doing that, and then adding layers to it so that it always stood out. And I did that with every single business. We did it, and then we went another level. And because we went another level, it was attractive, then someone would buy us out, right? So that's kind of how I navigated that.
Yeah, that's cool. I think about there's million people that you've trained and growing. What's maybe one thing that you've seen maybe on a regular basis that maybe holds trainers back or just holds people back in general?
I think there's a couple of things. I think, and again, I hope this doesn't sound too glib. I think fear is the number one thing for everyone, but they don't recognize it. Some guys are, oh, don't fear. You get the big masculine guy who says, oh, I'm not scared, right? But that guy, maybe he's just scared of intimacy. Yeah. And he may be fearless when it comes to jumping out of a plane or boxing. But then, so when we look at fear, we have to understand it. And so what I realized was, and this is what I practice still today. I just started a new sport last year. And so it made last year feel like 5 years. I took up dirt biking in the mountains, which is very physical. And so it's just, I love it so much, right? But fear, if we look at the definition of the word fear, it's the anticipation of pain. And so what I realize is that most people, whether it's physical or emotional or spiritual or financial, is that fear of getting hurt is not something they're always aware that's happening, but because, oh, if I open up fully, or if I love deeply, if I give my whole heart to that person, I'm going to get hurt. That's not something we actually hear sometimes, but subconsciously, I think that fear is the governor, let's say, and is what part of the reason why when we step over our comfort zone, that our body actually, this is science, this isn't me just making this up. The body secretes chemicals into our body when we in any area of our life, when we step over our threshold of our comfort zone, we get this flood of chemicals, and the brain interprets it as fear, apprehension, doubt, and uncertainty. Fear, apprehension, doubt, and uncertainty. And for most people, when they have that little feeling of fear, apprehension, doubt, or uncertainty, they have a normal reaction is to either freeze or to retreat. And what successful people do, or what people who understand that the brain is trying to just keep us safe, it's not trying to stop it. It's trying to say, whoa, hey, Dave, you've never done this before. Are you sure? Are you okay? Are you good? That's what it's trying to do. But for the majority of people who don't know, they feel that unease, fear, apprehension, doubt, and uncertainty. And what they do is they stop and freeze and retreat, and they go back, and they'll just say, oh, yeah. And you ask somebody, say, oh, yeah, I just don't do that. You ask most people, and again, it's not about physicality, because where somebody could be really strong, if we talk to men specifically, which I know is your audience, I've worked with some of the biggest, strongest, toughest, and hard as nails. But then when it comes to their heart and intimacy and opening up and that ability to get hurt emotionally or to expose themselves fully and to live a full life, full range, they're all closed down. So that's why they're over here being all tough. But they're limited here because the anticipation of getting hurt. So then they don't fully step into things. So I'd say that's probably the number one, Gavin.
Yeah. And if you're saying this, I literally had a conversation with a fella in Canada. Right? I've spoken to, you're the fourth person in Canada I've spoken to today from Australia, which is awesome. Love the Canadians. But that's exactly what this guy went through this morning. He was like, yep, okay, I'm going to enroll into our Man Alive experience. And then it was like the fear hit him, the unknown hit him. And that's, I suppose, the personal development space. I'm talking to a genius here. You've seen that how many times over the last
Yeah, but you've been to any of my programs. The one I did over in New Zealand, which was I put people into the high mountains, but it involved helicopters, it involved bungee jumps, it involved all these different things. And one of the biggest, strongest, toughest guys started crying because he had to sing because we did karaoke. Who knew that there was this part of him that was just so scared, and it went back to something that happened when he was a kid. And for him to stand on stage and hold that microphone was terrifying. And it was actually limiting a lot of his decisions in life. And yet he was fearless in all these realms. And then, we found, and I was just like, it's so wonderful because when we understand how these things work, then we're able to navigate life in a whole new way because we understand how the brain works, but then we can see the visceral. We know when we're stepping outside the comfort zone, and instead of being stopped by that feeling, it actually fuels us, right? So I went on a course when I took up dirt biking last year. I did a 1-week course in the mountains, and I'd never been on a dirt bike. And so we're riding for 7 hours a day up in the mountains with these great teachers. But I won an award. They call it Hooked on Dirt, the most passionate rider of the group. And most of these guys have been riding for 20 years. And it was just amazing because I went into it knowing there was lots of times where I could feel that, oh shit, excuse my language, what's happening? But instead of retreating, I knew that if I stayed with it, I could develop the skills and I could get better faster with that feeling of apprehension, fear, doubt, and uncertainty.
Yeah. And I like just a great example of practicing what you preach. That's, I think, probably why you're loved so much. Why I love you, so you do what you say, you're the real deal. And I think has there been any moments for you to actually, was it conscious, I'm going to step up and just be David T.S. Wood? Was there a moment, was there times where that happened? Or
I think that if you go back to how I became a trainer, it was born in the fires of probably one of the worst experiences of my life. And this is why, if you listen to some of the great trainers, Lisa Nichols, a close friend of mine, right? She'd say, make your mess your message. It's where we've messed up the most in life often, or where we've had the biggest heartaches. Sometimes that becomes the fuel for our purpose. It calls us. It's like people who've gone through alcoholism, let's say, they often end up creating environments where they can help people with addictions by truth. So for me, I was asked to MC a wedding. And my friend Sean, he said to me, he said, Dave, just don't do anything conventional. And I remember going to and I wasn't a speaker, I wasn't a trainer, I wasn't on stage, but I remember going to a bookstore and there was a kind of a book that said the art of emceeing a wedding or something. And I remember opening it up, and it was all of kind of what to do and what not to do. And the first page, it said, don't do anything unconventional. So I closed it and I put it back on the shelf, and I decided I would do anyway. When I finished the MC portion, I was living in a small town, 800 people, and the groom's family all flew up from the United States to be at the wedding. And all of my friends were there because this was my closest friend's sister. We all knew each other. And at the end of the MC portion of the wedding, where I made it all about me. It was like honestly a dog and pony show of the worst. It was just awful now looking back. Yeah. And the groom side of the family all got up and walked out, and they didn't come to the party afterwards. Some of them didn't speak to him for a year. And the next day, I'd never felt total public humiliation. I remember standing backstage. I knew I'd messed up, but I didn't know how to stop. And one of the groomsmen came back and said, you should be, that was disgusting. You should be ashamed of yourself. And I remember I snuck out the back door and I went and I laid in a dark room. And the next day I flew to Europe. I couldn't face anyone. And on the way there, I stopped at a garage station and one of the grooms or the groom's family was there. And he tried to bash my window in at the door. They wanted to kick my ass because I'd messed up the wedding. So I went into kind of complete isolation internally. For years afterwards, I kept drifting on. I'd look up into space. And my wife at the time, she'd look at me and she'd say, stop thinking about it. She could tell I just kept reliving this over and over, thinking if I'd done it differently, if only. And I lived in this world. And then when my marriage was on the rocks and we wanted to work through it, and my wife and I are close, my ex-wife and I are close personal friends. In fact, she was here yesterday. So I just want to make sure you get that part.
Yeah.
But some friends said, why don't you go to this personal development program with Harv Eker called Warrior Camp? And the last time I'd done any personal development was like 20 years before. And I hadn't even thought, I didn't know what personal development was. And when I went to that camp, we were up in the mountains in this big tent, and there's Harv Eker, one of the great trainers of the world. And I'm watching him, and halfway through the second morning, I looked at my wife, Pam, and I said, I'm going to teach this program. And it was like my whole life, everything I'd done, I was listening to his stories and Warrior Camp. It's like you could teach Warrior Camp. It was everything you teach about Man Alive. It was all of that condensed into these 5-day program. And I'm like, I live this stuff. This is how I think. Everything he told, every thought, I've got stories just like that. And that's what started me. And because I had been so scared I'd sworn I'd never speak in public again. I would never take that risk again because it was so humiliating. And I was living in this kind of pain and this shadow of that wedding. And so I decided to follow this guy and become a master trainer. And I applied myself to that. And I just, for a whole year, I followed him. I volunteered. I cleaned toilets. I did whatever I could to be in that energy to learn how to become a great communicator from the front of the room. So it was actually one of my worst experiences that catapulted. And so Harv was one of those mentors because I was watching him in front of a room. And I was like, oh my God, it's incredible to see somebody with such ability to move people through these processes and to get them to feel something they've never felt before, right?
Yeah. Mate, and what a great mentor. What was that experience like, being in that room, in that environment, having that kind of leadership, that you're attaching yourself to?
What's funny is this. I go up to him at the end of the 5 days. I walk up to him and I said, hi, Harv, my name's David. I said, I would like to teach this program. He said, yeah, everyone would. Harv's quite a short guy, right? He's about 5'4", and I'm 6'3". So it kind of like, and he has this kind of a little bit of a Caesar complex at times. He's like, yeah, of course you would. And he said, how many of my programs have you taken? And he's a consummate salesman. I'm like, this one. He said, you got to take them all before you ask me this question. So I signed up for what he called Quantum Leap, and I did 13 programs that year. 13, right? Wow. And they were all, and anyway, so the last one was called Wizard Camp. So Warrior is where I started. Wizard, which is all about working with energy and going with the flow. The wizard is like what attracts. The warrior is what fights, right? Anyway, and at the end of Wizard Camp, I went and sat with him and he said, I want to tell you something. I said, what's that? I remember I'd done 13 programs and I was volunteering. I always took the whole year to focus on this. He said, you'll never, ever be on my stage. He said, you're too cocky. I'm never going to put you on, just so you know. And it was like, I'm sitting there. I'm like, I spent that year, $25,000, $30,000, right? Maybe more with travel and everything else. And I'm like, and I said, I swore. I said, guess what? I'm going to keep practicing and you're going to get sick and you're going to need me and you're going to call. And I was like that. I was belligerent. And I went home and I worked even harder. And I didn't know what to do. But and what
because happened? If I can interrupt, that would have taken most people out, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it was just gut wrenching. I almost felt sick when I told you the story. I could feel that same nauseous, hopeless. There's this guy who made this promise, and I'd given everything. And you remember what I said to you about? At one point, I became his assistant.
Yeah,
and so I watched his assistant, and I did everything that assistant did, and then I did more. And that's where he started to notice. So he was giving me a chance. But the thing is this, he'd give me a chance to warm up the room. And because of my stories and my British sense of humor, sometimes the audience would go nuts. I got a standing ovation when the first time I told my story on stage. So he was giving me chances But I think I was a bit of a, looking back, I felt like that. And you know what? Within a month, I got a call and Harv was sick. He had an event in New York, of all places, and it was for 1,600 people. And he says, David, he had this bad flu. He says, I need you to go and do this. Because I'd been volunteering at all of these. So I knew the program and I'd been assisting him. So I knew
And
the
you were
program.
warming people up.
And so I remember going into that event and I was so scared because I'd never taught the whole event. I was teaching a 2.5 day called The Secrets of the Millionaire Mind.
Wow.
And here I am, just thrown in by fire. And my sales were exactly the same as his the week before, because I connected with the audience and I wasn't trying to sell them. I so believed in this personal development. It radically changed. 13 programs in 1 year was a radical shift in my mindset and what I saw, how possibility. I put so much into growing myself. And there's a great saying that says, your wealth can only grow to the extent you grow yourself, right? Yeah. And your comfort zone is a reflection of your money zone, right? So if you look at your bank account, that pretty much reflects your comfort zone, right? So if it's small, and so that opened this door to now where I became his #1 trainer, and I was making $150,000 a weekend because I made commissions on my sales. So I went from, so it suddenly overnight, it kind of happened. Yeah. And then one day I decided to quit because of integrity. I walked away.
Okay. And that's, so. It's funny you say that, although not about the integrity back, because we were taught, and what you did, 13 programs in 1 year. I was coaching a group of men earlier, a couple of hours ago, and we were talking about doing daily actions. Yeah, and that was something that I was told by another mentor years ago. You can have the 7-year plan or the 1 year plan. You can do something once a week and be there in 7 years, or you can do something every day and be there in a year. And I guess that's what you did.
I still do. Look, my dirt bike, I ride my Harley a lot, like in the summer, but I have a dirt bike in the garage. It's 100, 300. And I go out there for 10 minutes. I'll do it right after here. And I'm practicing my balance, static balance. And I just go in the cul-de-sac outside by where I live. And I ride around for 10 minutes and I can feel this gradual improvement of this little amount of time that I just realized that. And if I keep doing this every single day for 10, 15 minutes, then and now I go out there sometimes and the bike is actually standing still. My feet are on the pegs, and I'm like, holy crap, it's actually happening. But if I waited, if I approached it like a lot of people approach their life or their business or their relationships, God forbid, we could talk about relationships with women. This is one of my specialties, but just how men approach that. When we bring that same philosophy into every aspect of our life, or like cooking, like we eat food, every person should be a magnificent chef, because guess what? I cook for myself as if I'm cooking for guests. Guess what? I'm worth it, right? So I think we can apply it to every aspect of life, Gavin, not just business but I think when we apply it to all areas, we start to see this incredible transformation that happens in all areas of life, right?
Yeah. And I suppose, mate, you've been an integrous man, and that's what I'm always promoting with guys going through the Man Alive experience. Do what you say, what you do. Make sure that you're aligning your mission and purpose. So when your diary and your values line up, man, you're a successful man. And that we say everyone has a number. I don't know about that, but like when you've got to walk away from $150,000 kind of weekends because of integrity, mate, what was that like?
It was how he spoke to his volunteers and how he treated them. And again, I've never said this in public. I really probably shouldn't say this in public, but that was the moment. And he's a great guy. He's changed a lot of lives. But that moment, what I realize is that I choose to live by a set of values, and it's tested all the time. And last week, I put the house on the market because we just bought a sailboat. We're going to go cruising for 3 or 4 years. So we just bought this sailboat. So we just put the house on the market. I had 3 offers in one day. The one offer, the person was so rude to the realtor. I wrote a letter. Now, this was a good offer, right? I wrote a letter to them and said, you know what? I wish you great luck. It was lovely meeting you, but this house isn't for you. Because in my world, there is no amount of money that would allow me to sell the house I've loved, that I've spent 12 years creating, right? To somebody who is rude to someone. Because I find that kindness is probably if I look at a superpower, probably my particular superpower, I've already done 2 random acts of kindness today, but I look for opportunities to random acts of kindness every single day in every single way. But when people are rude to people or whatever, then I'm not going to stay in that energy, or people, they take advantage of someone, or I would rather walk away and start over than sell my soul to that particular devil. And I just remember when I walked away, I didn't know what the heck I was going to do, but it led into that next chapter where I met you. If I hadn't walked away, because I believed in what we were doing, I truly believed in what we were doing, because these programs had changed my life.
Yeah.
But I didn't believe. Once I got close and I realized that the intention behind it was different from what I felt. And then if we're going to say this is how you should treat people, but we don't treat people like that, then I had this conflict. And I walked away from 3 of my most significant income streams because of the same reason. All 3, same reason. Whereas when integrity was in question, and that's when we find out who we are. The only time we can find out who we really are is when we're put to the test. And we're in a moment where we have to decide between what's right and what's convenient, or what's right and what maybe what's profitable. And if we decide to live that life of integrity, the first truth isn't the one we tell, it's the one we tell ourselves. And it's like to look in the mirror and take inventory of where our physical body is a representation of what we believe. So if we're out of shape, it tells us something about our highest value for ourselves. If we eat crap, so there is this truth, I think, that starts internally when we look in the mirror. Even like I have lots of faults. It's not like I don't have them, but when I see them, I do my best to work on them. But I have to be honest with myself. I say, Dave, guess what? I quit drinking completely 15 months ago because I realized it was starting to get a little bit more of a habit, Gav. It was just like, I was in this place where it was just getting very social, and it was like, and I really had to talk to myself. It's like, it's such an important part of my social life. But then I realized that for this chapter, and I think in chapters, this chapter of my life can be radically different. I can start at any day. This chapter of my life can be radically different. And because of that, can make new choices, right? Yeah. I don't have many sayings in my house. There's one up there that says, it's never too late to start the day over, above that counter right up there.
Love
right?
it. Yeah.
So I think that truth, when we get back to it, is the truth that we tell ourselves. And then we look at the results are the feedback from the universe, from God, from whatever your belief system is. But results tell the truth. If your bank balance is empty, it's a result. If you're overweight, it's a result. If your credit cards are maxed out, it's a result. If your relationship sucks, it's a result. So then we look at the results, and then we have to work backwards. And we have to say, okay, so this is the result. And the formula to get that result to change is to go back to environment. That's what you do. You create an environment. What is the environment that is creating the way I'm thinking, which creates how I feel, which creates the actions I'm willing to take, which creates the results that I see. So then we just go back. So the formula I love to use is environment leads to our thinking, which leads to our feelings, which leads to our actions, which leads to our result. When our environment is bad or sucks, or we're around negative people, we start to think negative thoughts, which means we feel kind of crappy, which means the actions we're willing to take are pretty crappy actions. Maybe it's sitting on the couch and binge watching, or maybe it's whatever, right? And then the results never ever lie. So the only thing we can do to take inventory is look at the results. Look at all those areas that are most important to us. And we say, oh, look, this is a result. If I want a different result, if I want a different body, then I've got to go back to the environment. How do I create an environment where my health or working out is a non-negotiable? And then how am I going to think about it? How am I going to feel about it? What actions will I take daily to get the result that I want, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I can't believe, mate, that now you're going to Europe and I'm not going to be in Europe.
No, Caribbean. Well, I'm going to the Caribbean.
Caribbean now. There you go.
Two years in the Caribbean. Yeah, you come visit. That's all right. You and Michelle come down. Come stay on the boat.
I'm done. We're there. So it's been, and I love what you say. You think in chapters. I always say the same thing in seasons. Life's always changing in seasons. So this next season of your life, mate, and I suppose like what you say, this is why I encourage everybody doing our Man Alive experience. We're thinking in chapters, in seasons, and what our strongest, our highest value. What are the things I love. My rite of passage for the Modern Man book, I talk about creating personal oaths. So even moving forward into the next season of your life, mate, what is, you've got so many sayings and quotes and along with your values, what's something moving forward that you're going into the next
Yeah,
season?
well, I
No.
think it's interesting because it's such a great question. And before, or maybe the next time we do a call, or maybe on this one, remind me to ask me about the gap theory, something I'm working on in my head, right? I want to
Okay.
talk to you about. But look, when you look around what we built here, a lot of people, the question they ask is, "Oh, are you going to miss the house?" Or "How can you sell it? It's so beautiful," whatever. And so that's again the comfort zone, how the brain works, wants to keep us in the
Safe.
same place because it's safe and comfortable, right? And
Yeah.
so when I've been with Asta for 10 years and it was her birthday, January 24th, and I surprised her with a trip to Montreal, which is where she's always wanted to go, where my youngest son, Ben, lives, by the way. And I also surprised her with a wedding. She's always wanted to get married. And we had this spectacular wedding. It was very small, which is kind of how I liked it. But it was like, and then after the wedding, she looked at me and she says, "Dave," she said, "I have this dream." And I looked at her, I said, "Asta, I thought I knew all your dreams." She said, "It's kind of new." She says, "I'd love to live on a catamaran and for a year or two." I'm like, and that was 6, 7 weeks ago, 8 weeks ago, I think it was, maybe 7 weeks ago. And so I'm like, all right, let's sell the house, let's buy a boat, and let's start this chapter. If that's what you really want, let's do it. So I researched a boat. I flew down to Grenada. We found a boat. I bought a boat. And now our plan is this, but to let go of all of this, let go of it. This chapter was one chapter. There's nothing in here that I can't let go of, because I realized when we die, right? And I had a really interesting experience this year. I was asked to attend. My friend chose his moment of death, and he asked me to be there with him. So I was actually with someone who we call it made here. So watching someone his last 3 months and then being there for his death. When we die, everything we own sort of passes to somebody else, and they all have a different way of feeling about it, whether it's a collection or whatever. But for me, this was an incredible chapter. This next chapter is about exploring love in a way with Asta. My focus is not the boat, the way the boat, I've sent you a picture of it. The boat is it's going to be social. So our friends can come and live on the boat with us. And instead of our friends coming for dinner, they'll come for a couple of weeks, and you'll be in this adventure on a sailboat in the Caribbean. And so we'll be able to spend real beautiful quality time with our friends and family. All right. And I get to explore this intimacy with Asta. She's going to retire, and she's going to come, and we're going to explore our love. And we've always said there has to be somebody in the world that has to be the greatest lovers and the greatest partners on the planet. And I wonder, going back to my modeling example, how do we get there? Who do we have to be? How do we have to act? And in our relationship, people who know us, who are around us, they always feel like we just met because we've been together 10 years. But one of our secrets is that we put each other first, always put each other first. So if she gets up first, I always find toothpaste on my toothbrush. If I go to the bedroom first before she comes to bed, toothpaste is on her, little lax. But we're always putting each other first, and we're exploring this level of passion and intimacy and friendship and kindness and love. So that's this chapter. And of course, it's a 45-foot boat. And
look, there's for everyone. There's the boat.
There it is. Yeah.
There you go.
So Gav, I fly on Monday to New York. There's only one place in the whole country or the whole of North America that teaches a course on those engines on that boat. So I'm going to go and do a course on those engines. And so I want to make sure. So I'm already prepping for this new level of learning and skills. And it's like I feel like a teenager again because there's so much to learn.
That's what I suppose we're always talking. That's what's so great about you. You're always the student. You're always upskilling. You're up leveling. That's why you are who you are. It's amazing.
Thank you. And I feel so young. When I look at myself, I feel when I'm around most 65-year-olds, they feel very old. People start old talk when they're 40. Oh, I'm 40 now. Or they start even how they dress, how they show up, how they live. It's just like it's almost accepting their lot instead of saying life is a constant dance of design. Whatever we want, we can create. It's just there, but we got to feel it, and then we've got to take the actions on a consistent basis to get it. But it's the actions getting it. It's not when we get it, it's the steps to get it. That's the juice, right? Like you think
That's
about the
right.
boxing, it's not just the boxing match. You think of the time in the gym. It's the sparring partners. It's the
Yeah.
training. It's the push-ups, right?
Yeah. It's all, I was, in my language, I would say it's all you, who you need to become on the journey to step through those ropes. So it's who you're becoming to step onto that boat, isn't it? To be that lover, man. It's a season of love. I love that. That's
Season
gold.
of love. Season of love. Look at that. Look, season of love.
Hey, you did it, man.
Yeah, that's so
So
good.
good, so good. So yeah, so all right. So you got, and I suppose that's the whole thing is that you get to certain seasons in your life, like you say it, whether it be your 50s, your 60s, your 70s, and I suppose that's probably what I'm always talking about, casting that vision, getting that picture in your mind, and that's what I believe. That's why you're so youthful. You've got that clear picture.
Yeah, and I think the youth is so interesting because, and there's lots of cliches around youth, but there definitely is a way of living that is young. You know what I'm saying? That is youthful. There's a way of showing, like waking up with passion. How do you do that? I got a friend who's like Eeyore. If you look at Winnie the Pooh and Eeyore, oh, every single day, it's like he just sees the dark side of it. And I would kick him, and he's my banker, but he's a friend of mine. But it's just every day. It's just like he can't see, and he can't see the beauty, and he can't see what he has. And I think some people get trapped that way. I do think it's when we think in chapters or seasons, if you're in a season right now that you're not loving, the truth is you could start a new one as you right this second. It's just the choice to say, okay, I want to start a new season. So then go back to the philosophy. What's the environment? So if you're with Gav, this new environment, so what's the new thought process I can have? And how can I feel differently? And what actions will I take that's different? And the results will always be different. So using that one simple formula.
Yeah.
And the other thing, Gav, I think that a lot of people, you asked me about what stops people. I said fear. The other one is this idea of regret. And I think looking forwards and backwards. And I think most people are like this. They're going back, regretting what they didn't do and afraid of what if. What if it doesn't go wrong? What if she rejects me? What if it doesn't work out, right? And I've developed, and I had to unpack this for myself. When shit happens, when something goes sideways, let's say the house burns down or you get diagnosed with something catastrophic or whatever it is, right? There's this, I call it closing the gaps. So from the time something happens, you're in a car accident and there's enough evidence to support this, break your back so you can't walk again, whatever happens.
Yeah.
That's the event, right? And then there's this gap. And a lot of people, they lost money or they were embezzled or the husband cheated on them or whatever. They never close the gap. They live in this world. And so that victim kind of mindset is, oh, you know, what happened? Something happened back then. And this, oh, if only. And so what I believe, one of the practices that I feel I've mastered is closing the gap, is how soon after something happens that is out of our control, that what most people would think of as negative, how soon can I close the gap and let go of that energy 100%, so it never ever doesn't impact me, it doesn't wear on me, it's not sitting on my back, I'm not walking around with it like, oh, and I don't, because a lot of people, it becomes their identity. They're oh, you don't understand, this happened. It becomes the story they want to tell everyone because they're looking for that validation. So I think when we master closing the gap in a way, and we practice it all the time, then we can handle anything. And if we can handle anything, then what can we do? We can do anything.
Yeah.
So that to me is a real mastery, and it's such a beautiful practice, but you can only practice it in real time. You can only practice it when shit happens. And it's like, hold on a sec. Okay, this happened. How long before I'm willing to let it go? And I'm not saying you can't mourn. I'll give you an example of that. When my dad died, I had this feeling something was going to go on. There was no reason, but I flew to England having with this kind of hunch. And I talked to Asta, my wife, and I said, that sounds funny, my wife. I said, what do you think? She said, you should go. And anyway, we went there, and 14 days later, I actually spent the night with him in hospital. And I looked at him, and I said, Dad, you don't have to wait. If you're ready to go, just go. And he went in 12 hours. But I remember getting on the plane. So here's the gap. My dad died, all right? And now I get to choose how long I mourn. How long do I feel sad? How long do I want to have this gap open? And so I decided that on the flight home, I would mourn on the flight home, which was about, by the time I got home, was about 16 hours. Right. And I remember writing in this long letter he was dead, but I wrote this long letter and I was crying and I was feeling and I was emotional. And I got off the plane. The gap was closed because the practice was I finished mourning. And now when I talk about my dad, I talk about him with I tell stories about him. We laugh about him, but I have no sadness, zero. Yeah. So that gap theory, Gav, is something I think everyone can work on.
Yeah. You maybe coming to the close of this, I'd like to maybe just say a couple things. Maybe just, mate, in closing for this podcast, what's maybe some nuggets that you could give to people? And what I'd like to say to the audience as well, if you would like to hear more about that gap theory, and even you mentioned earlier about relationships with women, if the men are going to maybe listen to this or watch this, leave me a comment and let me know if you'd like David to maybe do something on relationships with women, as you said before. But mate, in closing, what's maybe one or two nuggets you got for everyone?
I think, we all get the same amount of time each day, right? There's 24 hours in a day. The one thing we don't know is how many years we get to live, because whether it's an accident or it's old age, we don't know. And we don't know how much life we get to live in those years. In other words, we don't know if there's a moment where things can change physically or health can change or decline. So we get to live this moment, this day. And so I think one of the things is to find absolute joy. There are things we have to do every day. We have to eat, we have to sleep. There are things that we have to do. But those things that we have to do, what if you make those special? I truly believe that routines or rituals, and rituals may sound a bit, but routines, like you're going to eat, why not eat beautifully? Why not buy the best food? Why not learn how to cook and cook for yourself as if you're cooking for a king or a guest? Why not do the mundane? Find magic in the mundane, because the mundane is a lot of our life. So if you wake up and you're able to master the mundane and you're able to make the mundane special, I get goosebumps. So whenever I get goosebumps, I make a lot of money. But that idea of making the mundane special and doing those things and realizing that you're going to do them, it's like, oh, I got to cook again. And I know that sounds weird, but it's just people. I did a keynote for Dan Martell. He's a guy that wrote the book, Buy Back Your Time. He asked me to do him a favor. So I just did it recently for him. And he said, how do I introduce you? I said, just introduce me as the happiest person I know. And I truly believe that I'm happy. Yeah. I'm the happiest person, because I'm like this all the time. I'm not doing this because Gav's asked me to be on a podcast. I just see the world and I understand that one thing, I know I'm going to die, by the way. Most of you pretend like it's not going to happen. And I'm totally, we should talk about death too. Death is a big subject. I love to talk about that, but most people don't. And that's why I was able to sit with my friend as he died once and make sure. I said, you better not be fucking sad when you're done. You're choosing to go. Let's make it a goodie. But the idea, though, is that to first of all, master the mundane. The second is this. When you make life about yourself and your own, when you focus here on your issues or whatever, then what happens is it's almost like you're facing backwards. And there's every single moment, I could tell you even 2 or 3 stories from just today. Every single time you walk out your door, every time you're around somebody, there's an opportunity. There's an opportunity for kindness. There's an opportunity for connection. There's an opportunity for conversation. There's an opportunity to create a story. I love creating stories. I love, and that's when Gav said, I think I offered to come on. I can't remember what happened, but I said, hey, as long as you want, right? But the idea about kindness is being your superpower, is when you're in a rush, when you feel like there's that moment when you get frustrated or whatever. Just think about that. What if I was being supremely kind now, and you come back into this moment and you use kindness instead of frustration, and then watch what happens to the world around you. It's like you have this Midas touch, because everyone loves being around your energy and people bend over backwards. I don't do it for that reason, but it's just like, how come everyone does nice things for you? Because I live in a world where I put other people first. I consciously want to be a servant to other people's feelings. And not like sacrificing my own, but just being beautiful, being kind, being open, being gentle, being courageous, hugging strangers. Why the hell not? And it's contagious. It ripples into people and they feel it. And so the world you experience is not the world. You don't know what's happening in Africa in a little village somewhere.
That's right.
That you have no freaking idea.
No.
The world you experience is completely a reflection of what's happening inside your body.
Yeah.
So if you're hard on yourself, you think the world is hard. If you're judgmental, you think the world is judgmental. If you, all that shit that goes on in there. So if you want to live in a world that's absolutely stunning and beautiful, do it in here. And let it come out. And then when crap happens, you don't take it personally. When someone cuts you off, you smile. It's like, oh yeah, I've made that mistake so many times. You don't get frustrated, right? When someone lets you down, you say, yeah, I'm human. I understand that. But you close the gap quickly so you don't always in this ping pong game of victimhood, right? So that was a lot of things, but there you go.
Man, that was gold. Keep going. That's why, listen, guys, if you want to hear more from David T.S. Wood, mate, what is your podcast as well? Could you we might even grab the link and put that in there.
Totally. I went off social media probably a year ago now. I've just switched everything off. But if you want to listen to some of my old stuff, they're so good. There's not video, but it's The Kick-Ass Life. Kick-Ass Life. Yeah. Some of those old interviews, my God, Tim Ferriss, and there's so many good ones, but they're not on a stream anymore. But yeah, my TS Wood is Instagram, but you'll see, I've just said, hey, I'm taking a break. And I focused on this chapter. And I tell you what, it's lovely. There's lovely.
Let's go. Guys, if you want to listen to David T.S. Wood, you got to leave me a comment and tell me what you want. What you'd love to hear from David. Maybe we can get him while he's on the yacht. You've seen the yacht. So terrific, mate. I want to say a massive thank you. You're amazing. I just can't thank you enough, not just for today, but for coming on a decade since I've known you, mate. You've just been an amazing man for me personally to watch you, and just those over the last couple of years, those encouraging comments and messages. Well, when I was in the Mediterranean, forever, man, I could go on, but just a supporter for my family. You're amazing. So thank you again.
Thanks.
God bless.